Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the city's redistricting workshop. It is 10:01, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And my name is Scott Trujillo. I'm the city's deputy city manager. And I think we have a few other folks with us via Zoom that I'd like to introduce, starting with our city attorney, Roxanne Diaz. She's on via Zoom, so hello, Roxanne. I don't have a list here of participants, so I see there are 11 on there. So if I miss anyone, I also think that our city manager, Brian Montgomery, is going to join us via Zoom as well. So welcome to those folks. I believe also a couple planning commissioners. So hello out there as well. Here in the council chambers, we just have one gentleman, Mr. Nieto is joining me. So we just have an audience that is online, and this essentially will be a virtual meeting. So why are we here is the question, and why do we gather on a Saturday? And we just wanted to have, this has kind of been in response to some community input, asking for additional outreach. So just another great opportunity for us to, for the public to give input and feedback regarding any proposed boundaries when it comes to the redistricting, and just have an informal discussion on the topic. Now, what we'd like to do first, and I'll introduce our primary speaker today, which is Jeff Simonetti with National Demographics Corporation, or NDC. And he's going to kick off our meeting and kind of talk and get some background and so forth on the process and the rules. So without further ado, Jeff, the floor is yours, and happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday to you as well. Good morning. My name is Jeff Simonetti, and Scott, just making sure we can still, everybody hears me okay? We're good?
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
Perfect. All right. So good morning. My name is Jeff Simonetti with the National Demographics Corporation, as Scott mentioned. We appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Used to evening meetings, as you can see. And so this morning we'll be talking a bit and having a more informal discussion regarding the remainder of the redistricting process. We're going to walk through, we're going to do two parts here. So we're going to walk through a quick presentation related to the remainder of the redistricting process, walk through what we have to do for remaking the maps, the timelines that we have here. We'll stop and see if there are any questions associated with that. At that point as well, we're going to talk again about the neighborhoods and communities of interest within the city. And we will stop at the end of the presentation to see A, if there are any questions associated with the presentation, and B, if members of the public would like to give us some feedback on neighborhoods and communities of interest. And then we'll move into an overview of the online mapping tool, and so that we can walk through and just give you a demonstration on how that works, so that if the general public would like to submit maps, they can. And then we'll stop again and ask if there are any questions associated with that. So if that, give me one moment to bring up the presentation and share my screen. All right. Scott, you can see the presentation okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. So as I mentioned, we're going to go through the overview of the redistricting process, particularly talk about the project timelines, next steps and hearings, and we're going to talk specifically about the neighborhoods and communities of interest as well. So why are we going through the redistricting process? That's the most important question to ask and discuss at the beginning here. And so, as you know, every 10 years, the US Census Bureau updates their census data. The current districts that you have within the city of Indio are based on the 2010 census data. However, obviously for the last 10 years, there's been shifts in the population, there has been new development, and as a result, there are new census data that has to be aligned with the maps, and there are certain rules and criteria that we have to follow. If there are changes to that don't align with the with the demographics with the new 2020 census data, that is the reason why we have to go through and change those maps. So as a result, the elections that are upcoming in both 2022 and beyond will be subject to the new maps that are created. And so, as you know, the districts within the city are staggered and have different election times. So districts 2, 3, and 4 terms end in November of 2022, and districts 1 and 5 terms end in November of 2024. The new maps that will be, or the new map that will be created as a result of this will be applicable to both the 2022 and 2024 elections. As a result of the Assembly Bill 849 or the Fair Maps Act in California, there is a very specific set of timelines and hearings that we have to go through for the redistricting process. So we've held our 2 initial hearings, and you have to have at least 2 initial, what we call pre-draft map hearings. That took place on November 3rd and December 1. Those are again held prior to the release of the draft maps, and they are primarily for education and to solicit input on the communities of interest and the neighborhoods within the district. Again, we also had two Census Bureau data releases. The first was in mid-August from the US Census Bureau. And then California has released what's called their statewide database in late September of 2020. And this is the database that we use for the purposes of districting and redistricting in California. The difference between the 2 databases is that the US Census Bureau counts prisoners at the prisons. However, for the purposes of the redistricting process, the state of California goes through a process of what they call zeroing out the prisoner population and creates a prisoner adjusted database. So what they do is they take those prisoners that were counted within the prisons wherever they are and match them back to their last known address. So for the purposes of redistricting, we use that database that is using the prisoners from their last known address for the purposes of districting and redistricting across the state of California. Those are the numbers that you'll see that we'll focus on here in a bit. We also have to have at least 2 draft map hearings, which are going to be taking place on January 19th and February 16th. And those will be 2 public hearings to discuss and revise the draft maps and to discuss the election sequence. When we talk about election sequence, again, that is which districts will be up in 2022 and which districts will be up in 2024. At that February 16th hearing, that will be the introduction for the first reading of the ordinance. So the process for approving the map is done via ordinance, and that requires 2 hearings. So the first hearing for that will be on February 16th. And then the map adoption hearing will be done on March 2nd. The final map that will be approved has to be posted at least 7 days prior to that adoption hearing on March 2nd. And the process has to be completed by no later than April 17th for us to be able to meet the deadline to submit that map to the Riverside County Registrar of Voters in time for processing for the November 22 election. As I mentioned, there are a couple of key rules and laws and goals that are associated with the redistricting process. And we put those into 3 main areas. The first are the federal laws in the red box on the left-hand side, and that specifically pertains to the Federal Voting Rights Act. There are 2 main components of that. First is that districts have to have generally equal population. And when we say generally equal population, the districts have to have a no greater than 10% deviation from the smallest district to the largest district. We'll walk through how that gets calculated, but as you'll see, the City of India, with their current districts, with the 2020 census data in, is slightly over that population deviation, which requires that we need to go through the redistricting process and change the maps. Second, the Federal Voting Rights Act specifically states that there can be no racial gerrymandering. The second set of important laws pertains to the sort of light blue colored box in the middle, which is the California criteria for cities. And specifically, that comes out of AB 849, or the Fair Maps Act, that was passed in 2019. Now, this bill was passed late since you guys went through the redistricting process. So there are new sets of criteria that we need to follow as a result of that. And the important thing to remember about those criteria that we have listed here is that they are rank ordered in terms of priority. So first, districts have to be geographically contiguous. When practicable, they have to have undivided neighborhoods and communities of interest. We'll talk more specifically about what communities of interest are, but they are essentially socioeconomic and geographic areas that should be kept together for a district's purpose of effective and fair representation. The districts have to have easily identifiable boundaries, and those can be either natural or man-made. And the districts have to be compact. And when we talk about compact, that means that you do not bypass one group of people to get to a more distant group of people. Finally, on the far right-hand side, we have some other traditional redistricting principles. When we talk about respecting voters' choices and continuity in office and minimizing voters shifted to different election years, that pertains to the election sequence. As you know, as we discussed in one of the first slides, there are certain districts that are up in 2022 and certain districts that are up in 2024. Let's say, for example, you're currently in a 2022 district, but as a result of the new map, your lines would get moved and you're now in a 2024 district. We try to limit the number of people who would get shifted to between different election cycles as we draw the maps. We can also take a look as well at potential future population growth. So let's say, for example, there's going to be a big master plan community or a new major apartment complex that might be coming in to a particular area of the city. You can slightly underfill that district, but it has to be within the 10% population deviation. But you can slightly underfill that district, knowing that the district will grow into itself. So let's take a look now at the current district demographics. So this shows the makeup of the existing districts, however, with the 2020 census data put into it. There are a couple of key and important things here to remember. First of all, here's your total population for each one of the districts, and your total population of the city from 2020 is 89,518 residents. You'll see here on the second line too, where we talk about the deviation from the ideal. So how do we determine what population deviation is? The deviation, when we talk about an ideal district, that's simply a mathematical equation. So take your total population and divide by the number of districts that we have. So in this instance, you have 5 districts within the city. So to determine that ideal size district, meaning what would it be if you had exactly the same size districts, is again 89,518 divided by 5. Okay. Then we determine what your existing districts are, and are they overpopulated or are they underpopulated from that ideal? So as you can see here, in terms of total population, the District 1 currently is the largest district with 18,738 residents, and District 4 is the smallest district with 16,934 residents. If you take the difference between the population deviation as a percentage from the largest district, which is District 1, from District 4, which is minus 5.42%, you get your total population deviation of 10.08%, which is just above the threshold of the 10% population deviation, which is allowable. As a result, because we're over that threshold, we need to go through the redistricting process and redraw the districts to get, again, 2 things: get under that population deviation and factor in communities of interest and some of the new items associated with the Fair Maps Act. An important thing before we move on from deviation as well is to remember that you may see here, for example, districts 3 and 4, they are under the ideal population size. that does not mean that those districts shrunk. It just means that they grew less relative to the other districts, like districts 1 and 2, for example. The other thing too that we're going to go through when we look at the demographics associated with each one of the districts and drawing those is we have two different sets of population figures. Total population is, again, looking exactly what it sounds like, the percentage of each demographic in relation to the total population within the city and within a district. When we look at things pertaining to protected class voting, we particularly look at down here what's called the citizen voting age population. And that means that it pertains to any citizen within the city that is over 18. Okay, so it doesn't mean that they are registered to vote. It just means that any citizen who is over 18 that is eligible to vote within the city. And as you can see here, currently with the way that the districts are drawn, we have 3 majority Latino citizen voting age population seats. Districts 2, 3, and 4 currently as drawn have majority Latino citizen voting age populations. Here is a map of the districts, again, and just visually with the population balance here in terms of the percentages. So again, you can see districts 1 and 2 are the largest districts now, and districts 3 and 4 are the smallest with the way that the current districts are drawn. And again, remember, that just means that, again, those districts did not shrink. It's just that districts 1 and 2 grew at a relatively faster pace than districts 3 and 4 did. Also can show here too visually the citizen voting age population data. And so for each one of the demographics that I'm going to show you above, for the next couple of slides, have the same coloring. So the purple and bluish colors for each demographic data is a lower percentage. And for the orange and reddish colors are a higher percentage for each one of the particular demographics that we're showing. So here's a map again, visually showing where your Latino citizen voting age population is by census block. This slide shows the Asian American citizen voting age population. And here shows the African American citizen voting age population data, again by census block. So now let's go through and talk a little bit about what neighborhoods and communities of interest are, and see again at the end of this is if there is any further feedback from the general public as to what we'd like to define as those areas. So when we talk about neighborhoods, it's talking about an area that has a particular geographic area, and it's exactly like what you would consider a neighborhood. They can have natural dividing lines, such as mountains, rivers, streams, those types of things. They can have unnatural dividing lines, things such as roads, major highways, those type of things. Or they can be an area around a particular landmark, parks, schools, a downtown, or other neighborhood landmarks that you may have. When we talk about communities of interest, this has a very specific definition under AB 849, and it's in red here. A community of interest is a population that shares common social or economic interests that should be included within a single district for its purposes of its effective and fair representation. So in practice, what does that mean? A community of interest takes that geographic area that we talked about in a neighborhood and adds a shared issue or characteristic on top of that. So it could be a shared social or economic interest. It could also be an area that is similarly impacted by city or county's policies. And when we talk about communities of interest, we want to ask you to tell us your community's story. So would this community benefit from being included within a single purposes of its effective and fair representation? Or would it benefit more from having multiple representatives? And again, important thing to remember is that definitions of communities of interest may not include relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. Finally here, let's talk about some of the key dates and next steps that we have for the process. So we have our third hearing that'll be coming up on January 19th. In late January, we'll be asking for the final maps that will be to be due from the public. We'll have our fourth hearing on February 2nd, and that will be the time where we'll be having the ordinance introduction. And then on March 2nd will be the ordinance adoption hearing, because as I mentioned, there needs to be two separate hearings for the introduction and then the adoption of the ordinance. This also, again, has to be completed by no later than April 17th of 2022 to be able to submit that map to the Registrar of Voters in time for the November of 2022 elections. So for the remainder of today's workshop, we'll stop here and ask, are there any questions related to the presentation? And we'll be looking again if there are members of the general public that would like to provide feedback on areas that meet each AB 849 definition of neighborhoods and communities of interest. And then we'll transition into an overview of the online mapping tool, ask if there are any questions about that, and then wrap up at that point. So with that, let's stop here and see if there are any questions or comments from the public about the presentation or to discuss communities of interest.
Thanks, Jeff. I see that Luis Huerta Silva has his hand up. I don't know if Scott, are you able to control that on your end? If you, Luis, if you're able to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Oh, great.
All right. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Luis Huerta Silva. I'm with California Common Cause. I had a question related to the final submission date for maps from the public. The presentation didn't have a date, and I was wondering if by when would you be able to determine that final submission date for the public for draft maps?
Sure. So we have our fourth hearing on February 2nd. So we need a little bit of time prior to that to process the maps. Let me circle back with the city attorney and Scott as well. But we would assume that would be at some point in late January for us to have enough time to process those maps.
And just to add on, I think if you have a map that you'd like to submit, you can submit those now, the earlier the better. So you can just go ahead and send those to the city clerk. And I will get the city clerk's email address on which you can send the map to. And so at the next meeting on January 19th, I believe, yes, we will be looking at some draft maps. And so please feel free to submit those maps from here through the meeting thereafter, which is in February. Hopefully that's helpful to you.
Yeah, having a solid date would definitely also be helpful as community organizations do outreach to engage the public as well.
Great, and I'll look for that email address and then I'll let everybody know what it is.
Great, thank you so much.
Of course. Are there any more questions from those on Zoom? Please go ahead and raise your hand. Scott, does the gentleman in the audience have a question or a comment?
Yeah, we have looks like 6 individuals that have showed in person here with us today. I believe a couple that are Spanish speaking. I know we have Spanish translation on via Zoom. We don't have that capacity here, but I'm wondering if the gentlemen have any questions, and you can address the podium in Spanish, and I believe our Spanish translator can then interpret on their behalf. But let me look to the audience and see if anyone would like to address the podium to ask any questions or provide any feedback.
pueblo inmigrante. Mi pregunta es, ¿cuál es el motivo en que no ponen las juntas en español? Porque la ciudad de Indio tiene demasiada gente latina y tiene que estar informada de lo que pasa en la ciudad de Indio. La segunda pregunta es, si en el concilio de Indio hacen diferentes miren para informar a la gente, ¿por qué no traen gente latina a que escuchen lo que hace el concilio de Indio? La tercera pregunta para el concilio de Indio. ¿Por qué es el motivo de que no vigilan las calles de Indio donde se miran muchas cosas malas? Queremos evitar el mosquito y en las calles se encuentra demasiada agua en las esquinas de las calles.
Okay, can anyone hear the interpreter? Can
Yes.
anyone hear the interpreter? I'm trying to do the, John Becerri, no?
I
Can I get some help?
I can,
Can I get some help?
Yeah.
Are we supposed to have one here today?
I'm here, I've been here since before 10 a.m.
Maria, are you able to,
to
are you able to-
translate. Yeah, if you hear me, I'll tell you what the gentleman's
Yes,
question.
we can hear you.
The question, I have a question for the city of Indio. Why is the reason for which they do not include the population, and why do not all meetings take place in the Spanish? There are a lot of population here in the city of Indio who speak Spanish, and we don't hear the meetings in Spanish. And the second question is, why is it that being that there are so many Latin people in Indio, you don't bring people to, and you don't bring us to the meetings at city council? And the third question is, why is it that Indio lacks vigilance? Why don't they watch after the cities and give us some form of vigilance when there is so much water on the streets and all kinds of bad things that occur to us here?
Thank you, Maria.
My pleasure. And I hope he hears me then when I'm speaking to him.
I think he does because it's being broadcasted in the chambers as well.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
Yes, this is Scott. I'm in the
I
chambers.
was awfully nervous from the beginning.
No,
So thank you.
understood.
Okay.
Thank you, Maria.
But yeah, thank you, Maria. And we can hear you loud and clear here in the chamber. So Roxanne, if you
Great.
want to that.
Okay. That's all that matters. So now,
Great. Has the speaker finished his comments? I wasn't
Señor,
sure.
terminó su comunicación.
No, tengo la cuarta pregunta.
No,
Por la
I have
calle
a
Charo
fourth
tiene
question.
36 años.
¿Cómo? Permítame. ¿Qué más dijo, señor?
Ok. La cuarta pregunta. Por la calle Charo, pasan demasiados niños a las escuelas, peligran porque no existe banqueta en esa calle. Van a esperar a que haya un accidente, maten un niño, no hay banquetas.
Okay.
Tiene 36 años que allí no hay banquetas. Esa es mi última pregunta. Gracias.
Okay. Now, my fourth question is on Sharon Street or Caron, or there is a lot of schools or school children are in that neighboring area, and we don't have a sidewalk on that area. There are a lot of children who walk to get to school on that street. Are you going to wait until a child gets killed? There have been no sidewalks in that area for 36 years.
Great. Thank you.
Gracias, señor.
I just wanted to clarify, Jose, the street he's referring to is Shadow, S-H-A-D-O-W. And when he said that there was a problem with water on the street, it's because it's a place for mosquitoes to breed. So.
Thank you, sir. Scott, just wanted to follow up quickly on a couple of the questions made. Our meetings, our agendas are available in Spanish. And there, I believe, Scott, and we can follow up, that the Spanish agenda is posted online. And then also we do have an interpreter at that meeting. And I know that when you look at the agenda, there is a way to hear the meeting in Spanish as well. And certainly in terms of the second question, the meetings are open to the public. We're one of the few cities that are still that have now gone back into live meetings. And so anybody's welcome to join us in person or by Zoom. And we do have that Spanish translation.
Okay, let me tell the gentleman that. Señor, tenga entendido que las personas están invitadas a las reuniones del Consejo Municipal cuando se quieran presentar. Hay una intérprete y la orden del día o lo que llaman la agenda, que son los temas que se van a discutir, los ponen en español. Además de eso, sepa que también la ciudad de Indio no solamente los hace públicos como todas las ciudades, sino que están abiertas al público para que se presente. Gracias.
Thank you. Scott, I think I have a speaker here online if there's nobody else in the audience, or we can go back and forth, whatever you'd like.
If we can stay here in the council chambers, we have another resident that just approached the podium.
Great.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ana Lisa Vargas. I'm a resident of Indio. I'm also a community organizer with Communities for New California. So yes, I understand that the live Spanish translation is available to those that are participating via Zoom, but we also need it to be simultaneous translation for those in the audience. So
tenemos que tener la traducción simultánea. Yo sé que hay
Jose Garduño just said to English, but he needs to have like a translation, device that he's also being able to hear everything else. Because, for example, he wasn't able to understand the presentation because the presentation was provided in English. So he needs to have that at the time of the meeting, if that makes sense, because otherwise he's not able to fully understand what's being said. And I also just want to thank you for the presentation, Jeff, and also just mentioning that I wanted to ask, so based on the ranked redistricting criteria,
cuando se trata del asunto.
So like something like a VRA district would have priority as one of the top ranking, right? And then also, from my understanding, it's communities of interest. Because I see that there's these other like traditional redistricting criteria, such as like continuity, and so in office. And so those, from my understanding, those are only things that will be looked at when and if, as everything else that's ranked criteria has been done. And so I just want to understand a little more about that process. Thank you.
Yes, that's a good question. And yes, you are correct in that. So in terms of the process, in terms of the laws that we're looking at, yes, the Federal Voting Rights Act is the overarching in terms of importance for looking at things like I mentioned, looking at equal population, no racial gerrymandering. And then, yes, you go into the California criteria for cities under AB 849. Then, yes, once those items are achieved, then yes, you can look at some of the other traditional redistricting principles. But you are correct that yes, it's in that order.
We have one more comment here from the council chambers.
Hi, hello. Good afternoon. My name is Eric Leibitz. I am a resident of here, Indio. I just wanted a little bit more clarification on your timeline as far as the key dates and next steps. As far as after the fourth hearing, I wanted to make sure if there was going to be a sort of transparency as far as the maps that were also being submitted by the public and what that adoption hearing would look like after the maps have been seen. I know just in previous conversations and a lot of what the community input that has been around my neighborhood, there's a worry of the maps that are being submitted online are not actually being fully acknowledged or also not being fully displayed for public view. So I think that would be something very important to help the community address and just have a transparency, not just of the adoption ordinance, but the type of maps that are being submitted by the people and by who. Thank you.
I can answer a little bit about that. To date, we have tried to get the word out through our website and social media with respect to the map and the mapping tool. And we've not received any submitted maps through that avenue. And yes, any maps that get submitted through that avenue, we will post those and provide those both to the council and to the public on our redistricting webpage. So hopefully that answers your question.
Good morning, residents of
Buenos
Indio.
días,
My name is Eric
residentes de
Nieto.
Indio.
I'm
Me
a resident
llamo-
of Indio. Just got a couple questions on the redistricting. I was in the process of this the last time around. I don't know
Estuve yo
why we're doing this
participando
again.
con este
It hasn't been
proceso.
10 years. I'm not going to get into that discussion. One of my questions is, okay, how long is a person going to run for a district? That's one of my questions. Like, how long is a term in a district? You know,
The term is 4 years.
4 years?
Yes, sir.
So is that in the bylaws?
That's in the California election code.
So a person can run and run and run and run
Yes.
in the district?
In any city, unless there are term limits, that's correct.
Okay, just one of my questions because
Mhm.
you know, we need more people to run in different districts, and it's kind of weird because we had a couple residents here and it was quiet when the gentleman we got here this morning. And another question is I would like to see, we could have a meeting, maybe with colored pencils and paper inside of chambers. So we can, like, with community members, we could, you know, do like a workshop inside of chambers so we can have more of the community involved, more of it. We have a translator speaker here so people can be more involved, English and Spanish, so we can have more community input. Because as we look at it, it's very, very hard to walk this community here in Indio. I walked many districts here in the last 10 years. Hard, very hard. You walk through districts, you can't even get in them. HOA communities, you can't even get in them. It's very hard to walk this community. So, you know, different parts, Heritage Palms, Sun City, big communities like that, you can't walk through them and talk to them. It's very hard. So maybe we need to adjust the lines a little bit so we can have a fair play on the next time around. Thank you.
I can tackle part of that, Mr. Nieto. So the map we have here on the easel, along with additional maps here, we've blown those up today for that exact purpose. So we can actually take some pen to paper and have you guys draw and propose your boundaries and so forth. So we can have that interaction as we can. Roxanne, I'm not sure if you have other speakers requesting to speak on via Zoom.
I do. I'll go ahead and start that. Karen had her hand up earlier. Karen, did you want to say anything?
Yes.
Hi, Karen.
Good morning. My name is Karen. I live on Miles Avenue. I believe that that whole neighborhood of Sungold, so essentially Monroe East towards City Hall, should be kept together all the way down to downtown. One of the ways to get into downtown Old Town Indio is on Monroe and Miles. So I would suggest the district start there and move its way down from the Sungold neighborhood into downtown Old Town. Part of the reason being, right, one, it's like a main corridor into downtown. There's a lot of activities that go on Miles Avenue, including like the parade, the park, the Dia de los Muertos event at the museum. So there's already a lot of cultural community activities that the community participates or can participate in the future with. Our neighborhood also includes Hoover Elementary, College of the Desert, the Cárdenas, and the Food for Less. I believe that this region should also include like the fairgrounds across 111. They should include the swamp meet area. And the reason why I say this is because I ride with a bicycle club. We're called the Valley Kittens. We do a Wednesday cycling club every Wednesday. We meet at the swamp meet, we ride towards downtown, we ride up Miles Avenue. So it's like a very natural thoroughway for cyclists. The other city document that I'm looking at is a downtown specific plan, which keeps all of the communities, give me a second, I thought I had my map up. It really does keep all of the communities between Highway 111, Indio Boulevard, up to Monroe, Miles together. And then the last sort of rationale behind this particular district being sort of elongated down to Avenue 48 from Indio Boulevard, essentially like north-south, would be sort of like a parks network, right? So between Miles Avenue Park, the Date Festival, Jackson Park, the Davis Sports Complex Center, like those are all community designated locations that are just like open to the public, that our communities walk to, bike to. We have specific plans for, right? That housing element, our houses look alike. So that's my first sort of comment here. I had a very similar comment to the gentleman before. I didn't catch his name. He's wearing a black sweater and a green mask, but his comment about sort of the HOA communities, I believe that the communities stretching from, and I'm looking at this through census tracts, so stretching from Washington down to Adams, over to Monroe on that part of the freeway. So things that include like the Shadow Hills Golf Course, Sun City, the Indio Municipal Golf Course. So moving the entire communities along the back end of Indio, the Wyndham Golf Resort, Terra Lago, those communities really should be kept together in their own district. If nothing else, the simple fact that they all have HOAs, and within their HOAs, they have networks that allow them to go in and out of their community, unlike the rest of us who don't live in those neighborhoods, right? Like we don't get invitations to their light parades. We don't get invitations to their garage sales, right? Like they have this inner working HOA network that allows those community members to go in and out of each other's HOA gated communities. That is okay. I want to make sure that my comment isn't heard as like that being bad. That's actually a good thing, right? It allows that particular community to continue to form its community. So the district, the way I would draw it would be all the way from Washington Adams, all the way along the back end to Dillon Road. So I would connect all of those census tracts along the top. I'd also connect Monroe down to the highway, the I-10, and just make that like one continuous district that is like HOA friendly, that already sort of has its own network of community built in. So yeah, those are my comments for today.
Thanks,
And I
Karen.
guess the last comment would be to follow California law around language and the Brown Act, especially now during COVID. It is very important to have translation services made available. We don't want to break the law. This is something that only happens, well, will now only happen in the next 10 years. So it is fair and equitable that and legal that everyone get the same access to language. And that
Great.
is.
Thank you, Karen. Our next person here, Christian Seha.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can. Scott, can you hear him in the audience?
Wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for making the time. My first well, I have a few comments. The first one is I also want to echo something that was brought up about the HOA communities. Particularly, I would like to suggest for us to look at the current zoning and how we are planning for future development as it happens in the city. So we know that we have equestrian estates. We know that we have desert estates. And I think that it makes sense for those communities to be represented together. Like Karen, who just spoke before me, mentioned they already have organized representation and are a part of a different set of community events that the rest of us are not involved in. And so it makes sense for them to have particular representation. And this brings me to my next comment on the current division of the districts, where it seems that new Indio, and I'm talking about everything that is being developed past the 10 and over by Golf Center Parkway, seems to be lumped up currently in all of that area, or that north side of Indio. Seems to be divided into 3 districts as of now, and I think it makes more sense for us to look at the housing that is being proposed through the housing element and the not the housing element. I'm sorry, the general plan. Excuse me. And the designation of the zoning. So it just makes sense for the representation to be done, for those districts to not have, for North India not to be so divided is basically what I'm trying to say. For there to not be so many different districts in that area, it just makes sense for there to be one more continuous one on the north end, and also not to lump in some of the low income and moderate income communities in North India, or what used to be older New in India, into representation with those higher income housing on the top. The other comment that I also wanted to share is that it's of concern, something that was raised during the presentation about the deviation difference and not wanting to mess too much with voter voting times. It was brought up to me that earlier this week that there was a map that was submitted by Council Member Amid, and I just wanted to ask if it's if council members will be presenting their own versions of their own maps, and how does that impact the way that maps that are submitted by the community will be weighed in. And my question about submitting maps is, how does the city intend to present back to the community the way that they will be either incorporating or not incorporating the suggested districting lines that individuals are submitting into the draft maps that the city will be bringing back. Excuse me. And I believe that's all that I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seha. Certainly anybody can submit a draft map in terms of how those suggestions get incorporated. Both Scott and I are taking notes, and our demographer as well. And so we will all be looking at that. And certainly when we present draft maps, then we can point out where things were incorporated as well. And I know that Jeff's going to walk through the mapping tool, and I think it would be important for anybody who has made these great suggestions to use the mapping tool and submit that information to us. And certainly that way everyone can look at it and the council can look at it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And just to add on to that, so any map that gets submitted by the public through our mapping tool by the deadline will be included in the process. And so one of the things that we'll do is a couple of things to make sure, obviously, that any map that gets submitted is following the laws associated with, making sure that we are within the population deviation and whatnot. But yes, anything of those, any map that gets submitted will be part of the public record and will be submitted in the next hearings.
Thanks, Jeff. The next person is John. I'm just going off the top of the attendees in no certain order. John Becerra, go ahead and you can unmute yourself.
Hello, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you guys for taking the time. I really appreciate doing this on this day versus the end of a long work day. So couple comments specifically about, your guys' consideration for districts. My first being, I really would like considered is like our community centers, specifically our Indio Community Center, Teen Center, Senior Center. If those can be just included in the same districts as the neighborhoods that are adjoining to them. Obvious is that there's kind of like a campus feel to them, walkability, and just having the representation that does kind of get voted into that district, consider them as kind of one symbiotic area. So I think it's appropriate to kind of have those three centers included with the neighborhoods that are joined to them specifically kind of northwards on Clinton and Aladdin, I think is the street, and those kind of apartment complexes and the neighborhoods next to the Indio Community Center, I think should just kind of be lumped in one district if possible. My next comment is just kind of echoing the sentiment that I think Karen and Christian mentioned, and I think Mr. Nieto in the audience did too, is Shadow Hill seems to have kind of three districts and turn three representatives in that area. And I think it makes more sense to kind of bring it down to the more populated centers in Indio to kind of have more district representation in the center. I don't know if that makes sense to the demographer, but if it just seems a little off balance in terms of like how that HOA community is already connected and the socioeconomic difference between, old North Indio and new North Indio, and how kind of the centers of Indio have a lot more in common in terms of like their connectedness, their history, the corridors. I've kind of seen a lot of the trajectory of the plans for the city, and a lot of these communities are already lumped together in plans. So it makes sense for our districts to kind of reflect that a little bit more precisely. So I think maybe more of the centralized pieces of Indio kind of get pushed into like having more district representation, and maybe those northern HOA tracks kind of maybe get down to two or maybe one, even if it makes more sense to kind of have, like as people said, they have networks of communication, they have more in common. So that would be my last part. And otherwise, I think just kind of, I like the idea of like having that interactive community meeting that the gentleman said earlier. I think doing this today is a great step, and I really appreciate the city staff taking the time because I'm taking a lot of great and new information into, so I really appreciate that. So otherwise, those are my comments, and thank you guys.
John, this is Jeff. Just one question before you hop off.
Yeah.
You had mentioned there were three community centers, and I wanted to make sure that I wrote all those down. You mentioned the Senior Center, the Indio Community Center, and which one was the third?
The Teen Center. And they're all around on Avenue 46, and they're all directly north of 46. So I would have joined those with the same communities to the north of them as well. So
okay, Got it.
And I think, go ahead,
go ahead.
Jeff.
Well, the one thing that I was going to say was we can certainly take a look at what you were mentioning. On the north side. One thing to just keep in mind, though, we can look potentially at a map on that would put North Indio together. Just the only challenge that we might have there is the population balance, because as you know, they're part of 3 districts, and I don't know if the area would be too large just to have as one district to be population balanced, but we can look into that.
No, of course. I appreciate it. It's just, just a suggestion.
And I do think, but I'll double check that the senior center and the teen center are in the same district, but we'll double check on that as well. Great. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
The next person I have is Sandra. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hola, buenos días. ¿Pueden escucharme?
Yes, and we'll have our translator, Maria, if you're
Maria.
ready. Thank you.
¿Quieres seguir? Adelante.
Gracias. Tenía un comentario.
I have a
ya
comment.
listo, pero ya todos están hablando de distritos y calles.
It's about the districts and the streets.
Pero creo que ahorita
But I believe that now with
lo importante es que todos los residentes de Indio tengan el mismo acceso sobre el lenguaje.
The important part is that all the residents in Indio have the same privileges in terms of language.
Tener toda la información accesible en la página de internet de Indio, en estas meetings.
Have all of the information in Indio's webpage.
Tenemos la traducción en la página de internet, pero no está accesible, está hasta abajo, tenemos que buscar.
We have the translation in Indio's webpage, but it's not accessible. We have to look for it.
Y muchas personas que son mayores no tienen esa facilidad.
A lot of the elder people don't have that ability or that facility.
Igual en las juntas como tenemos en este momento, creo que necesitamos más acceso a eso. Tenemos que tener esta información accesible para todos los residentes. Esto es un momento importante para poder tomar las decisiones.
And I believe that as we have the information now, we should have better access to it in order to be able to make better decisions.
Hoy es el momento de actuar y no tenemos esa oportunidad.
This is the moment in which we would like to act and we don't have that opportunity.
Así que es el momento de informarnos y poder tener accesibilidad todos en general, para tener el derecho de tener esta información igual que todos.
It's time that we all be informed and it's time that we all have access to all of this information.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Gracias.
And I see that, Luis, you have your hand up again. You want to unmute
Señor Luis,
yourself?
tiene su mano alta, ¿verdad?
Yes, thank you again.
Muchísimas gracias.
Cause. I wanted to make the formal request that for
Yo
future
quería
hearings-
darles.
I'm sorry, Luis, I couldn't hear you.
Hi, yes, I wanted to make, based
quiero
on the public
asegurarme-
comments that
Maria,
have
can you just
been
let
made.
him go ahead and speak, and then we can do that after, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and I could repeat it in Spanish as well.
Thank you so much, Luis.
Yes, so I wanted to make the formal request to you, city attorney, and relevant parties that for future redistricting hearings scheduled for January 19th, February 2nd, and March 2nd, that there be provided live translation for both Zoom attendees and as well as in-person attendees. Can we consider this my formal request, given the 72-hour notice requirement from your website?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Y mi pregunta fue, para las próximas audiencias que tendremos agendadas para el 19 de enero, el 2 de febrero y el 2 de marzo, que formalmente este es mi pedido, de que tengan traductores para ambos los asistentes en persona y también las personas que asisten por medio de Zoom, para tener accesible los materiales y tener accesible la reunión. Y respondió que sí. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Sandra, do you have a question? Your hand is up, or is that from the previous one? Sandra? No, okay. Great, Scott, that's all I have here on Zoom. And I think, I'm sorry, Scott, one thing I wanted to note is on our redistricting page, the map that you see here in City Hall, I know it's
Lo que tengo aquí, lo que vean el mapa que tengo.
is also up on the web page, and what that map shows is all the district lines. But it also includes, for lack of a better term, includes various communities. So for example, you'll see the Sungold community here. You'll see Sun City Shadow Hills. And so they're really delineated, and that way I think it gives a better visual for those that are interested in looking at how we've talked about communities today in terms of where the redistricting lines are.
También dónde es que están las líneas de la
and where the communities are. So I would encourage everyone to go to our page and look at that map. And I think that you'll find that helpful. Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Scott, se lo voy a presentar.
Oh, sorry. Hold on, Scott. I have, it looks like the mayor has joined us.
De que el alcalde no está con nosotros.
Mayor Furman, would you like to say something?
Quisiera decir algo.
Can you hear me there?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good morning to everyone, and thank you for the participation. Thank you to our consultants and our staff and attorney, and also the community for participating in this weekend workshop. And thank the staff and the city manager for allowing us to do this on the weekend. I think it's important, as we see the concerns right now with the folks who are speaking, some of the issues that are being raised are general concerns with our community. And that's why these hearings are important, and this districting is important for our community members to understand who their representatives are on the council and the planning commissions, and also the community service. We have a lot of amenities in our city that fall under certain folks' umbrella of responsibility. And that's why this is important for representation. And for the future, I hope, as a council and the city, we take this into consideration with the English, Spanish interpreters, and figure out a way how we can make this a little bit more smooth, and make this possible for further meetings and posting of our meetings, because it's important that all folks are represented and have the opportunity to be heard and their concerns addressed, with 60% of Hispanic population in our city. So I appreciate the efforts that are going on now. We have made some progress. So I thank the city for that, because we have made progress. The only comment I have, and Roxanne, if I don't want to be in violation being the mayor, but I want folks to take this in consideration when we speak and make suggestions about North Indio. And if I'm wrong, Jeff, please correct me. I believe that when we make these districts, we're supposed to balance population, socioeconomic groups, and also race should be taken into consideration. And if we are looking to make North Indio, or north of the freeway, or Shadow Mountain, or Hills is what it's being called, one district or two, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm the mayor, but I represent District 2 for voting purposes, but also it's a district. So I feel that's under my responsibility. And I'm part of north of the freeway and south of the freeway. And I think that's a fair balance. And I wish I could be more into the inner city if that's possible. But I think all districts should be balanced to where folks are representing parts of different communities. And also it was brought up about community centers. That's excellent. I know we just received a grant, and for our sports park. We also have different high schools and locations, around the community. So I hope those are taken into considerations. our schools, our community centers, and those things. But I just want to thank everyone for the participation, and also thank the community, and also urge the community to put the word out and aid the city in the outreach and making these district maps, because regardless of whatever the mayor or council is requesting, it's the community, and we represent the community. So please aid the city in the outreach and getting the word out there for participation in these next workshops. Thank you, Roxanne, and thank you to our consultants and city staff for doing this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Roxanne, if I could chime in for a
Thank
quick
you.
moment, just as a reminder to the residents that that we do translate every meeting that we have on Zoom. But the point well taken that moving forward, if we were to have these workshops, to have not only translation online, which we've done, but to also have perhaps someone here in person, kind of doing double duty. So that's noted. But I just wanted to reiterate that we do translate every meeting on Zoom, so everyone's aware. And then we're about to move into the online mapping tool, and really that's the critical part here that we need the public to participate in and submit those draft maps to Jeff. And Jeff and Roxanne, I think I may have found two different dates. So if I could get clarification for everyone right now, it's regarding the fourth hearing. Is that going to be on February 2nd or is that February 16th? Because noting that will lend to Mr. Lemus's question, which was the deadline to get in these draft maps. So if we can clarify now whether it's the 2nd or the 16th of February.
The fourth meeting is on February 2nd. And so it's planned for, and that's not to say that it's going to happen, is for the introduction of the first map, but certainly, we have a meeting coming up next week on the 19th. I think I'm ahead of myself, sorry. And so on the 19th, and so I would encourage that members from the community submit their maps to the clerk. And I do have that address. It is cityclerk@indio.org. And so to email her your maps, even if you don't use the online mapping tool, if you decide to, for example, take on our agenda from the last hearing that we had back in December, there was a map that was included there that shows the districts, and I believe that there's one on our website as well. You can download that, print it out, and you could do it the old-fashioned way if you'd like. So it doesn't have to be on the mapping tool. It can be written in hand, and we can, those maps are there, and you can just download those and print those out and make your notes on that. And so, and I would say that it all depends on what the discussion is on the 19th in terms of what happens on the 2nd. But I would say clearly get those maps in the sooner rather than later.
Jeff, did you want to move into the online mapping tool, do a quick tutorial?
Sure. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for everyone's comments. Very appreciated and helpful to hear what the thoughts of the community are regarding the communities of interest. Again, that was very helpful. And just wanted to follow up about just one item before we move into the online mapping tool, because it's pertinent to what we're going to be discussing. Mayor Furman made mention of this, as well as a couple of other speakers. The important thing to remember here is that one of the overriding principles we talked about at the beginning pertains to the Federal Voting Rights Act and having generally equal population. And so whatever maps that we choose as a result of this process, again, has to be within that 10% population deviation, and is also one of the overriding reasons as to why we're going through the redistricting process here, because the existing district maps are not within that population deviation. So again, that's an important thing to remember too, as if you're going to submit a map, that we have to have that population balance. So with that, give me one moment and I will transition to the online mapping tool. Just making sure, Scott, everybody can see the map here.
Yes, we sure can.
Okay, perfect. All right, give me one moment here. Okay, so when you go to the link here will bring you to this blank map. Okay, and this is the blank map of Indio. And so this, and you'll see here too, the blue lines that are on the map show where the existing district boundaries are, okay? And as you'll see here, if you see here on the right-hand side, this shows you what are called your precinct details, okay? So this gives you on the fly, so you can see what your total adjusted population as well as your citizen voting age population. So watch here as I go over each one of the precincts. Now see how each one of these changes every single time. So what this will do again is show you for each one of the precincts that you're hovering over, before you click on it, you can see again what the both the total population as well as the demographic makeup for the citizen voting age population is on each one of those. So how do we draw a map here? You'll see here on the left-hand side, we have the 5 districts makeup, as well as you'll see here, it'll tell you what your deviation is. And so currently, I haven't drawn anything yet, so each one of those maps each one of the districts has a 0 population. And again, the number here, we see 17,903. That's what we were talking about in the initial discussion as to what is that ideal number. So taking, again, this 89,518 and dividing that by 5. So how do we begin drawing a map? You'll see here again, you have each one of your 5 districts that you can draw, and each one of those, again, you select, and let's say we want to start drawing District 1. This is your paintbrush tool. And when you click on that, there's 2 different ways that you can draw in a map. So let's say, for example, you want to start out and you want to add in large areas. You'll keep this click on the precinct here. This is the precinct button here. And as you'll see, this adds large precinct areas at one time. Now, as you'll see here, see as I click on the map and add more precincts, that adds population to my district. So now I'm at 5,118. So you'll see that your population of the district increases and your deviation off the ideal gets smaller. Now let's say, for example, I want to get a little bit more detailed and more granular as to what I'm adding in. If you click on block here, now let's say, for example, I want to add in this area. If you click on that, now you'll see that that shows each one of your census blocks, and you can add those in by each one of the census blocks. Okay. Now let's say, for example, I made a mistake and that's not an area that I wanted to add in. You'll click on the eraser tool, and the eraser tool does the exact opposite of what you did. Okay, so now let's say, for example, there are some areas here that I want to take out. Now you'll see if you click on there, it erases what you had added in and will take out those areas. Okay, now let's say, for example, 2, you say, okay, I added this area into District 1, but I really wanted that in District 2. So if you click on District 2, and again, add your paintbrush go to your paintbrush, this will add any area that you either have as unassigned or that you click on that's in another district. It will add it into that area. Okay, so now see, for example, that was unassigned. Now I'm adding that into District 2. Now see this area right here, for example, and let me zoom in so you can see this more clearly. See how, for example, this is in District 1 in the bluish district. If I click on that, now, because I have that added, that adds that into District 2 as well. Okay. So let me just show you by way of example. Let me just, and again, I'm just showing you an example of a map here. This is by no means, I'm not going to draw a full map or a map that I'm going to submit, but I'm just showing this so you can see by way of example how the mapping tool works. Okay, so let's say, for example, I want this area in District 2. I want this area in District 3. I want some of the areas down south, let's say, for example, in District 4. And then I'll have some of the areas in the middle of the city for District 5. Okay. And again, I'm just doing this by way of example here. So let me show you a couple of important tools. I'll show you where you can see the statistics, and then we'll talk about how you submit that map. An important tool here is there are some areas that it's because there are some very small census blocks in some areas, it's easy to miss filling in all of the total population. So one thing to keep in mind here is that when you get your map done, this area that says unassigned population should be 0, because every portion of the population should be assigned to one district. Okay, but let's say, for example, you may get down to the end and maybe 100 or 200 population, but it's hard to see where you missed. If you click on Tools and then go to Find Unassigned Precincts, this will zoom you in to each one of the areas that you missed. Okay, and let's say, for example, I want to add that into District 2. Okay, so now you click on your paintbrush, say, all right, I want to add that into District 2, and it adds that in. And it will go through again, and it'll show you each one of the unassigned precincts or unassigned areas that you have. And you'll go through that and go through each one of those, assign the areas that you missed into a particular precinct, and then again, it'll go through all of those until you have no unassigned precincts. Another important tool here too is the Statistics tab. Okay, and again, we'll click on that. And this will show you again, and again, I obviously haven't filled in all of my districts here. This will show you here what your total population deviation is if you still have unassigned population, which is right here. And this here too will show you, are all of your districts contiguous? And again, I was just drawing an example map here, but it'll show you whether you have non-contiguous areas or not. So here in District 2, again, I was just showing this to you by way of example, but it'll show you whether you have fully contiguous districts or not. On the right-hand side here, this will also show you your demographic data. Okay, so this shows you what your total citizen voting age population is by each one of your particular demographics. And we'll also show you here too what your total population is for each one of your districts. So now let's say you are ready to submit your map. And again, this is just by way of example. But let's say this is a map that you are ready to submit. You'll click here on your map and you'll say, label it whatever you'd like to label it. Let's just call this Indio Test 1/8/22 for the date. That will be the name of the map that you will submit. You'll click submit on that map. And then what we need you to do is so that we know that that map has been submitted, please send us an email to city clerk. So CITYCLERK at indio.org. And that will let us know that the map is ready. And we will, again, take a look at that, make sure that it meets the requirements of population balance and all that. And then once we go through that, we'll process that map and it will be included as part of the submitted maps and public submissions for the next public hearing. So with that, why don't we stop here and ask if there are any particular questions that you have associated with the mapping tool, and we'd be happy to answer any of those questions.
We have one comment from Mr. Lemus. He's going to approach the podium.
Yes, how would we be able to put in notes into the mappings?
That's a good question. So when you send the email to the city clerk, and if you have particular comments or notes that you wanted to include as part of the map, when you make mention of the name of your map, add those comments into the email, and then that'll become part of the public record, and we can include those in the next hearing as well.
Thank you.
Scott, I have one person who would like to speak on my end. Karen?
Hi, Jeff. I'm wondering how I can export the map and then import it again.
What in particular do you?
So let's say I have a friend who sent me the map and I want to save their map onto my username. How would I? The only thing I figured out how to do was to export it and then import it again.
Has that person published that map yet?
No.
Okay, so if you ask that person to publish that map and let us know that that was submitted, we can we could just link that up and we can download and process that. I just need to know what the name of that map is, and it needs to get submitted.
Okay, let me give you another example because this is really what they sent me a map. I made my own edits to it and they have their own edits. So they sent me map A. I worked on map AB or A2, I guess. And now I want to save my edits to my own username.
Okay, yeah, well, if you've drawn that map under your own username, then you can submit that map through your own username, and then again, just give us the name of whatever that is, send that to the city clerk, and we'll get that published.
So when I click on maps, I don't see that map that I made edits to, that I did not begin in my preview and names, labels, modifications, all of that. Maybe I can reach out to you afterwards and share my screen.
Yeah, just send us an email. But if it's under somebody else's username, that person would have to submit that map. And then if you've drawn the map again you said you have an edited map. If that edited map is under your own name, you can submit that as well. And then both of those could get submitted and be part of the public record.
But Jeff, I think what she's trying to say, and I'm not sure it can be done is she wants to, let's say, first person map A submits it, it gets published, but then she wants to be able to use map A and do like an overlay over that and submit that without having to redraw the initial map.
Correct.
Okay, so you're saying making edits to that initial map?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I'm not sure that's possible because once it gets published, it's published.
Yeah, once it gets published, it's not editable. But yeah, I guess you could send us a second iteration or a second version of that map if you wanted.
Are you able to, are using the tool, are we able to print the map out?
Yeah,
No.
you can print that. You just do a print screen or
Okay.
Yeah, that would work.
Okay, thank you. That does answer my question.
Great, thank you, Karen.
And we have a question here in the council chambers.
Great, go ahead.
Thank you for going over the mapping tool. That was helpful. I just had a quick clarifying questions about the timeline that was discussed at the beginning of the workshop.
Mm-hmm.
So just want to clarify that the 2 draft map meetings are this coming 19th, and just kind of get some clarification because it was discussed that there would be discussion around the election sequence. And then on February 2nd, intro to the first reading of the ordinance. So I guess, and then here on the online, I see here regarding today's workshop, and those who are unable to attend Saturday's workshop are also invited to get involved by drawing their own proposed map before January 21st or by attending a future public hearing during a regularly scheduled council meeting, and it lists the January 19th, February 2nd, and March 2nd. So I'm just a little confused because there's a lot of dates, but it would be really helpful if for each of the upcoming public hearings, there be a description next to what exactly is going to be discussed and brought up. So my understanding is from the previous public hearing that I attended on December 1st was that on January 19th, actual draft maps from the city were going to be presented. So, so I would just also like to make a formal request that we have on, when we visit the webpage, it would be really helpful to see what is the final submission date for community of interest testimony from the public, and also the final submission date for draft maps from the public. That way going forward, we're able to concretely know, and what are the final date submissions, but then also know what is going to be discussed at the next public hearings. And then I just this presentation was provided to us today in English, but would just really like to make sure that so another formal request to ensure that all materials are available in English and Spanish, both people attending in person, and also I'm not sure if this is available currently on the district's web in Spanish. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and I took notes with respect to that. On our next meeting on the 19th, as part of the packet, we will be providing draft maps. And so those will be published on, looks like on January 14th when the packet comes out. And so those will be available we will make sure that there's more detail on the web page. But I would say to those that are here that if you would like to submit something for that meeting, please do so. You can either submit it by the end of the week, which would be the 14th, but regardless, you can submit it up to the 19th, and we will be posting that on our website. And they will be part of the packet that is given to the council and to the public as well. The meeting on February 2nd, currently is slated for the introduction of the map, the introduction of the ordinance adopting the map. However, it depends on what the discussion is on the 19th. So that's what we have the calendar for. But certainly if the council, after taking the public input, is not ready to move forward, then they're not ready to move forward. And so we will I can't really say what will happen on the 2nd, but we will provide a detail on the website as well, so make sure that everyone knows what's happening. And then in terms of the final submission date for comments with respect to communities of interest, certainly there's no technical final submission date. Those can be provided at the 19th. You can send your comments to the city clerk. You can provide those at any of our public meetings. So it's just a matter of timing in terms of once the introduction of the map is made as an ordinance, that's first reading, then it's hard to change that. So I would suggest that, depending on what happens on the 19th, will dictate that time frame. So hopefully that answers some of the questions.
If I can say the same thing, just a bit more simplified. The earlier, the better, to be honest with you. So as we present your draft maps, if you submit something this weekend, that's going to go on the 19th of January. If it's thereafter, after January 19th, that will be then presented on that February 2nd. So as soon as you can get those in, the better. And again, that's at the cityclerk@indio.org. And to Roxanne's point earlier, again, if the online mapping tool is not conducive for you, please even just draw something in. It's not ideal for Jeff at NDC, but it at least gives us more input from you guys as to what you're trying to accomplish. And also, before we leave today, let's do that on these paper maps here, so I can even get a better feel as to what you're seeking. So thank you.
I just want to add, just for the purposes of those that, I just want to reiterate that for the purposes of those that are not present and are not part of this conversation, that it be posted. So I know that's mentioned a few times, the sooner the better, but there really needs to be dates. And at the December 1st public hearing, I had requested that there would be a date, a final submission date for community of interest testimony. And that has not been posted to date. So those dates are really important because it gives individuals a time frame in which it's accepted. And as you mentioned, it depends, up until certain days, the timeline as we move closer. But our community needs to know that because if I know that if I need to submit my community of interest testimony by a firm date, then I'm going to make sure if it's not posted, then I might submit it after February 2nd, but then it might not be taken into consideration. So I really, really want to stress that the importance of this, and again, to make this process equitable for all our community members. Thank you.
Then I would say that you should submit your testimony by for the January 19th meeting.
Maybe please post it online as well.
We will change the date for that, but just so you know, testimony can provide it at any time. I do understand what you're trying to say in terms of having that communities of interest testimony be taken into account when looking at the maps, but I don't want to put on the website that you can only speak on a certain topic by a certain date. So, but for your purposes, in terms of as you said, providing value, then I would suggest that you submit that for the meeting of the 19th. Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up on the last speaker, just probably more communication from the city, the attorney, the corporation that's handling this. Just more communication with them, with all of us, so we all aware what the deadline is. so everybody could talk. I would like I said in my last speak, I would like to get the drawing here so we can all draw. Boom, 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 boom. So everybody could be more involved, you know? I say we do that. If we're not ready to go forward, then we're not ready. You know, you're giving us the pressure of us being ready. If we're not ready, guys, we're not ready. If we need more time to work on this as a community, we need to do that. You're putting pressure on us like, boom, 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 pressure, 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 pressure. It's not right. We're all a community. We all need to be involved. You know, like the gentleman said, like right now, he wants to do, you know, start doing with this. That's a start. You know, it's a start. It's very hard. I'm young and I know technology too. It's very hard on the system. It's very hard to do the little, like the gentleman was saying, click here, click here, click here. It's very hard. It is very hard. So just thinking other people in the community to do it, it probably drives them crazy. You know, you're putting pressure on us where it's already hard to deal with the redistricting, the process. We're not ready. We're not ready. The lady said she came in the meeting in December and she's still waiting. Come on, guys. We're not ready. We're not ready. We're not ready by the 22 election. Then we need to let the register of voters know, hey, we're not ready. We'll catch it in 24. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. I don't have any other comments on my end.
Not seeing any here in the chambers either. So if there's no other additional questions or comments, then we'll go ahead and close for the day, unless Jeff or Roxanne, you have any closing comments?
I don't, Jeff.
No, just one other thing that I just wanted to mention. There was a question related to the election sequence, and I think it would be important to make mention of that as well. When we finalize a map here, there's two parts to that process. That's something that we want to be thinking about as well. First is what are the physical boundaries of the 5 districts, but also attached to that is, as one of the speakers was mentioning, is talking about the election sequence. So which one of the districts will be up in 2022, which set of the districts will be up in 2024. And that's something that for the council to consider as well in this process, just to be aware of that. But I also just want to finalize and say thank you for the participation that we received today. We got a lot of good feedback upon communities of interest, and we can certainly continue that discussion at the next hearing as well. So again, thank you for your participation.
Great, thank you, Jeff.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. And thank you, Roxanne, for your time as well. And we will call it a day and adjourn our meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.